Hello, everyone. Welcome to Science Vs Bullshit. I had a week or two off, just a week actually, I think, to make sure that I nailed the last commit to 6 intake and that all my clients were happy. So that's what I was doing last week. Sorry, I'm sure everyone's really upset that I wasn't here. But many things have been sent to me, many things to review. And I will be covering Ella, the quote unquote golden pill, a few questions around creatine, and then a really interesting question from a client, and then maybe one more, but I'm not sure we'll have time, so we will see. The other really, I think, interesting discussion I was having this week is about being impressed by big businesses, even if they have literally been built off scamming people. And I was saying to someone how we should stop being impressed by that. Stop being impressed by big businesses built on scamming people, and also big followings built purely on misinformation. And I think we put people on too much of a pedestal, even if they've built things that might be big and, like, from that perspective impressive, but like the way that they built them is something we should absolutely care about. And a lot of, unfortunately, quote unquote, success in the wellness space is really just good marketing, not science, right? It's really good storytelling. They are excellent marketers. I'm sure people have noticed that in the wellness space, you can and people do build huge businesses selling supplements that people don't need, overcomplicating very simple problems to sell you a convoluted solution, by primarily targeting vulnerable people, claiming that you have the solution to a problem that they're having, by painting themselves as feminists and having a good storyline and that they're coming to save you. That shouldn't be impressive. That is manipulation, especially when it's targeted at women who feel vulnerable. For example, if they're struggling with fat loss, or if they're menopausal, or if they have PCOS, or people who feel stuck and frustrated and desperate. Preying on those people is exactly how the wellness industry works, which is really quite sad. And we're now at a point where follower count is is like a credibility signal, but really it should be one of the worst credibility signals. And this is because most big followings are built off misinformation, because the algorithm doesn't reward accurate information and nuances and evidence and the boring basic things that work. It rewards novelty and certainty and oversimplification of very complicated things and emotion driven like storytelling. That's why things like hooks, like you'll see like the one thing that is ruining your hormones and you don't know about, or like the one thing you need to do to fix your broken metabolism that you don't already have, or you've been lied to about fat loss, or I changed this one thing and I lost 100 pounds. Nobody wants to tell you this. It's a secret. Like, that kind of stuff is really cringe, and that is what does well. And that's why the wellness industry is in such a mess. And it's not that these people are always malicious. Sometimes they are. And sometimes they are just uneducated and overconfident and repeating messages that they've heard from somebody else. And they're kind of lulled into this false sense of security because everyone else around them is doing the same thing. And so they don't question it. But wherever the intent is coming from, the outcome is the same. Millions of people are being given misinformation. And that's the dangerous part. So what you should actually be looking for is for people who say, I don't know, I'm going to go look at the research, or we don't know based on the current research, or people who make things simpler and not more complicated to try and tell you something, or people who are open to debate and open to discussion and who give you the tools so that you can also question. And they're not telling you to buy a different supplement every single week. So one thing I wanted to do today, because I've been sent this a few times, and I think I might have even covered it before, is this this specific Ella supplement. Where is it? Let's see. Okay, so it's meant to be a quote unquote golden pill, and I was sent this a few times. What do you think of this? It's very expensive. Do you think the ingredients work? I'm quite convinced by it. this is useful because you can use what I'm about to do to go through any supplement claims. So first of all, I looked at the marketing on their website. It's basically, they use a lot of kind of quote unquote wellness words that don't really mean anything, and they're quite vague. And there's a specific reason that people do this. So their claims are things like naturally occurring in nature, and like they use kind of like historic, like people have been using these for centuries to cure stress. And then the ingredients that they've put in are all stacked together to imply that they like synergistically work together, even though they will have never been tested together. So from like an evidence-based perspective, like it just an overarching view of the ingredients in this, the evidence is quite weak, but there isn't none. So the core claim around this is that it supports women's natural rhythms, energy, mood, and emotional well-being, which sounds quite good. But because of the fact it's non-specific, non-measurable, and almost like impossible to falsify, and then they also show you no dose or population or studies behind it or expected like effect size, like this should be a bit of a red flag, but it also makes it really hard to dispute because it's kind of fluff, right? Like if you're telling someone that it's going to help your natural rhythms, what natural rhythms? Like what are we actually talking about here? And your energy, again, like what is that how you feel, which is very subjective. Your emotional well-being, again, it's very hard to like pinpoint what any of that actually means. So I would be quite careful with claims like that. And you will notice now that you've kind of opened your eyes to that, like you're probably going to see those claims everywhere. And then when you look at the ingredient breakdown, now some of this does have evidence. So they have ginkgo, which there is some evidence for, or is it ginkgo? Anyway, Ginkgo, ginkgo. Anyway, there's some evidence for improvement in cognitive function in older adults. In healthy populations, very little evidence that there would be any benefit. They've claimed that it's a focus booster. That's probably not true for most people, unless you're in the elderly category, and then maybe potentially. There's also Siberian ginseng. I could be saying all of these wrong. Sorry about that. There's some evidence for this, to be fair, with fatigue and stress. The effect size is very small and actually quite inconsistent. To suggest that it would work for everyone, again, is quite stretched. There's also, from what I could see, I can't see the dose of that. There are a few things that claim to boost testosterone, which is not true, which is probably a good thing. So it does say here something about like balancing hormones. None of these have any evidence for balancing hormones, which again is probably a good thing for over-the-counter things. And then beetroot extract is actually quite interesting. So there are real benefits to this in terms of blood flow and endurance via nitrates. Usually this would be in someone who has quite high blood pressure or for endurance events. I don't think I've seen anything, and I did try and look at this before, linking it to improve libido. Now, this is one of the claims around this pill, is that it's going to improve your hormonal balance and then improve libido. I can see a mechanistic rationale for beetroot extracts improving libido, maybe via blood flow, if that was the thing that was restricting. I'd say that's probably more likely for men than women. I can see it, and this is marketed at women, so it doesn't really make any sense. For what they're marketing it for, I don't think there's really very much evidence for taking it. I also don't think the dose of beetroot extract will be anywhere near high enough based on the size of the pill to actually get the benefits. I think one of the issues with a lot of the research around beetroot extract was trying to get a placebo alternative that was like high enough in nitrates that wasn't quite obviously beetroot juice, because that has such a strong flavor and coloring. It was quite hard to like placebo control that. I think they did come up with a solution eventually, but there was like issues with that, which makes me think that the dosing isn't quite as easy as just putting it in a pill. And then there is this claim, and this is also really, really common, that they put all of these things together and that apparently they just work synergistically together. The likelihood is they've never actually been tested together. And sometimes these things can work kind of, what's the opposite of synergistically? Counterintuitively, counterproductively. They can actually be a negative thing if you're putting them together. So it's most likely untested as a combination. And then where I think people are getting the most benefit from this, because the product is essentially promising energy, hormonal balance, control, and natural femininity is in their marketing as well. The most likely outcome, or the most likely reason that people are getting benefits, is because there is a placebo effect to it. There is an expectation. And then often with that expectation, your behaviors change alongside that. That's the most likely reason that people are getting any benefits from this. Now, based on that information, it's up to you if you want to spend £50 a month. It's unlikely to do you any harm. It's also unlikely to do you any good. And I'd probably more be interested, if you were interested in any of the ingredients and the benefits of those ingredients, I'd probably take them individually at the correct dose, which is very unlikely that you're going to find the correct dose in a supplement like this, where their main aim is kind of to underdose, because then they can keep everything much cheaper, package it all up together, add a little bit of fluff with it, and thus like sell it for significantly more. Now, based on that information, you can do what you will with it. I never tell people to take supplements or not take supplements. I'm just like, here's my view on it. Here's what the evidence says at the moment. This is what we know. Based on this, make your own decision. But though the way that I went through that is exactly how you should think about all supplement claims. So if you're seeing something and you're like, oh, they're claiming this, this, and this, are those actually testable claims? Or are they just saying that you will feel feminine energy? Like, what does that even mean? How is that mechanistically happening? What's the outcome here? Can it actually be tested? Do I believe this? That'd be the first thing I'd be looking at. And then I'd be looking at the supplements within it. By the way, the ingredients within it. This is also quite easy to do with ChatGPT now. You could at least do the minimum with that and be like, right, is there actually any evidence for these ingredients? Okay, there is. Oh, interesting. What's the strength of that evidence? Oh, okay. Who was the participants in those studies? Oh, it was all elderly men. Okay. Do I think that translates to me as a 30-year-old woman? Maybe, maybe not, right? So you need to kind of be a little bit more critical with these and go through these things and then be like, right, based on this, it's probably not something I'm going to spend my money on. Or you might be like, I think it actually might be worth me trying that specific ingredient for that thing that I'm struggling with. I'm going to test that out, just that on its own in the right dose. That's what I would be looking at. So that's my view on that. Next question I had was creatine. What is it? Do I need it? What are the benefits? So what does creatine actually do and what is it? I think a lot of people have kind of swept past this, but creatine helps us generate ATP, and ATP is the energy currency of the cell. So that's what we break down to make energy in all of our cells. So for example, in muscle cells, you would break down ATP and then use that to power muscle contraction. And creatine is primarily used by the phosphocreatine system, which is the energy system that fuels the first couple of seconds of exercise. It's like going back to my sports science degree. So do I need it? Well, I mean, technically, no. You will have some creatine from food. You can also synthesize your own creatine. You don't necessarily need to supplement in order to survive. Might you benefit from it if you're lifting weights? Yes. Yes, you may. It may allow you to lift slightly heavier weights, increase your volume, build more muscle. And interestingly, the body can only create, or generally only creates, about 1 gram a day. That's not going to be enough to saturate your creatine stores, which for most people is like 3 to 5 grams a day. If you are a bigger person and you have more muscle mass, then it's probably going to be closer to 5 grams a day. If you are a smaller person, it's probably closer to 3 grams a day. But yes, if you supplement with it, then you can saturate those stores in a way that is very unlikely if you're not supplementing or eating. I think I looked this up once, but now I can't remember. It was like, I think you'd have to eat like 8 mackerel a day or something, which would just be absolutely disgusting, and also probably quite expensive and cost you quite a lot of calories as well. So if you want to do that and then like enjoy any other food, might be quite hard to do. The benefits of creatine are primarily improved performance via, like I said, the phosphocreatine system. So that first push of exercise or movement when you need very quick energy. And this is because there are three energy systems. You have aerobic metabolism, where you're using oxygen to break down energy, and you can break down fat or carbohydrate or protein. Fat takes slightly longer to break down than carbohydrate, but basically you're using oxygen to break down some kind of fuel in order to create ATP. Then you also have anaerobic metabolism, which is the kind of middle ground between the PCR system, the very quick energy release, and aerobic metabolism, which is a bit slower. You have anaerobic metabolism, and this fuels exercise of up to like 2 minutes. So if you're thinking of like a kind of 400-meter sprint or something, you're mostly using anaerobic metabolism, which is also why you create lactate, which is the byproduct of anaerobic metabolism. So that's why your legs kind of start to burn and you can't maintain exercise at that level for very long. So you have these three energy systems, and basically supplementing with creatine will help that your quickest energy system, or the shorter energy system. But anything that's kind of sprint related or explosive, or even like I don't know, 3 reps of a bench press or something, is probably primarily going to be the phosphocreatine system. Now, these energy systems aren't like on-off switches. You'll often be using all of them synergistically, or your brain will be. You don't really need to think about that. The other claim around creatine is that there's these cognitive benefits. It's often promoted to perimenopausal women to reduce brain fog. There is a small amount of evidence on this. I think at the moment, my sway would be we don't really have enough evidence to make big claims about cognitive benefits. There are some really interesting studies, and to be clear, like my bias is I would quite like that to be true. If I'm being critical and fair, I'm not sure that it is. There was also, this was back a couple of years ago now, but if you want to claim that a supplement does something, you need to run it past this, like, I guess, claims process. It's the European Food Safety Authority. And the last time creatine was put up to kind of say, like, could we say that this increases brain function or cognitive function, that was rejected. And this is quite interesting because I remember reading these reviews and being quite compelled by them, and then seeing, oh, right, like there were problems with the statistics behind them. So there were 2 reviews that were published, I think in 2014, but I could be wrong about that. And they both showed that there were these cognitive improvements with taking creatine, and then some very clever person looked at them and was like, oh, there's a huge statistical error in that. And they had basically multiplied the participants numerous times because they tested each participant on different cognitive tests, which means that actually the results weren't statistically significant, i.e. creatine hadn't significantly, from a statistical standpoint, improved the various functions of cognitive ability that they were looking at. And this is the other issue, because you don't know when someone's talking about cognitive ability, whether they're talking about memory or reaction time, or sometimes they'll do some kind of specific task. Like often in rugby, they'll do like, shows how much I know about rugby, a passing the ball task, like a kind of like technical task of some kind, to assess how well people are doing. So I don't know whether I'm convinced on the hype around the cognitive benefits, but if you're taking it, and there will be people listening to this because there's some of my clients who take it and feel like it's reduced their brain fog, the likelihood is it's everything else that you're doing. It's the fact that you're going to gym more often because you're taking creatine, you're exercising more, if you're my client, working with me, focusing on your sleep, eating better, walking more. And I think often we give too much credit to the supplement. And I see this a lot with discussions I have around collagen, where people are like, what are you talking about? Collagen saved my life. I'm a completely different person. I'm like, you are giving this supplement so much credit for all of the lifestyle changes that you've made. You are a completely different person, not because of the collagen, because now you're exercising consistently, you're eating much better, you've lost 10 pounds, like you're sleeping better, you're caring about your health, you're actively investing in yourself and in your body. Like, I don't think people realize that, like, that's often the real benefit that they're getting from supplementing with something. So crux of that long-winded way of saying, would I take creatine? I mean, yes, I do take creatine, but I lift weights. I would say if you're lifting weights, it's worth taking. If you're not and you're purely taking it for the cognitive benefits, I'd question whether it is actually doing anything. But it is cheap. Most people don't have many side effects to it. So again, your choice. Your body, your choice. Okay, question from one of my clients. She says, I read or heard this a while ago, and I'd like your opinion on it, please. I was told that because I've eaten loads over the years, my stomach has stretched a lot, and I need to eat less and small meals so that I can shrink it and feel full sooner. Okay, so this is an interesting narrative. And actually, I looked up some stuff around this. So I always knew that the stomach was very elastic because I've studied that before, but it was many, many years ago. And apparently, I looked this up today, when your stomach can go from like a fasted state and it be about the kind of capacity of like 50 milliliters. And then it can, once you eat a large meal, go up to a liter. Like, that's huge. It's very elastic and expansive. And that's like just completely normal physiology. I think another point to make around that is often when people get slightly leaner, they think that they have a bloating problem and they don't. They've just eaten. Like, they're like, oh, every time I eat, I feel really bloated. And actually, that's just a normal physiological digestion as opposed to anything that's going wrong. And at the moment, there's no evidence to show that simply overeating would like permanently stretch your stomach to the point that you would then have to kind of eat very small meals in order to make it smaller again. Now, most of the longer term research that I looked at is in clinical populations. So, for example, someone who's severely obese or has had bariatric surgery, so like some kind of band or something to like shrink their stomach, which is much rarer now that we have GLP-1 drugs. So they weren't really applicable to someone who had just been like eating a bit more. I would also just remind yourself that there are many things that drive satiety and feeling full after a meal. And part of that might be your stomach stretching, and there are stretch receptors in your stomach. Part of it will be hormones like GLP-1, like PPY, like CCK, which stimulates satiety. And then part of it's also the food that you're eating. So the composition of that food, primarily food volume, protein, fiber. Protein has been repeatedly shown to increase satiety and reduce subsequent energy intake compared to calorie matched carbs or fats. And then fiber and food volume will play a role in how much the stomach is stretching without necessarily high carbs. So you could eat a lot of food, but lower calories in order to stretch your stomach, which would like essentially make you feel fuller. And then this is the part I really wanted to talk about. So I would actually strongly suggest that people, when they're dieting, try not to eat any less food. And that might sound like a very strange thing to say. You don't want to eat less food when you're dieting because your body is programmed to eat a certain weight of food or a certain amount of food, not so strongly programmed to eat given calories. And you will find that you are far more satiated if you consider food volume, not just calorie intake. So the key research on this consistently shows that when people eat foods that are very energy dense, they eat a similar weight of food, but fewer total calories. Did I say that the right way around? No. When people eat foods that are lower in energy density, right? So like more fruit and veg, more water, they will eat a similar weight of food, but because there's lower calorie content of that food, then they eat fewer calories, right? So for example, there's a few really interesting studies on this. One of them showed that reducing the energy density by adding vegetables to a meal, or basically any food that's quite rich in water, which tends to be vegetables, leads to a lower calorie intake without increasing hunger, which is really, really important. And then there are multiple studies that have also showed that participants in the study will tend to eat a fairly consistent weight of food, but the calorie intake varies depending on the energy density of the food choices. So you can kind of manipulate your own physiology to eat fewer calories based on the food choices that you're making without increasing your hunger levels. So you don't want to eat less food when you're dieting. You want to aim to eat similar or even more food volume, but from lower calorie foods. And people can eat a very small amount of very high calorie dense foods, especially if you're someone whose diet is primarily made up of like highly processed, I know another way of saying energy dense, but basically usually quite high fat foods as well. And then you can feel like you've not had very much and you're still very hungry, even though you've eaten a lot of calories. Yeah, basically that. And that makes it a hell of a lot harder to diet. So a really simple way to think about this is, yes, calories still matter, right? So if you only focus on calories and you're not looking at your food choices, you're often left very hungry on a diet, which means that it's very hard to stick to. If you only focus on food volume, you still might overeat depending on your food choices. So you kind of want to combine both. You want to have an awareness of the calorie content, but focus primarily on the food volume. And this is basically what people do when they're doing my 3-to-1 method. This is how I eat on the 3-to-1 method. We just don't really call it that, but the focus is on high volume, high protein, structured meals, which creates higher satiety on lower calories. And that's basically how you use good physiology to your advantage. So if you are interested in trying that, message me 3-to-1 on Instagram and I will send you exactly how to do that, a little guide on it for you. And send in anything you want me to go over. I hope that was useful. I hope kind of taking like you through how I would critique a supplement claim was useful. I think another conversation I had this week with just somebody on Instagram was a question I had about like, how do we know who's selling us stuff and who's not? And look, it's a bit sad that I can say this, but almost anyone promoting anything is probably selling you that thing. So I just be quite skeptical of it. And that's not to say that all of them are bad or that none of them have any benefits, but I'd always just question this stuff, like instead of just blindly buying things. And the amount of really, really intelligent women, I think the podcast I did before this one, I was talking about a client of mine who's extremely intelligent. You know, she has a law degree, and yet she's still been conned into taking hundreds of pounds a month worth of supplements because she's sleep deprived and she's tired and she'll try anything. And actually, it was making things a hell of a lot worse for her. So make sure that you're questioning these things and you take a kind of rational view on it. And I hope you have awesome days. If this has been useful and you think it might be useful to anyone else, please do share it. It would mean the world to me. And I've absolutely nailed exactly 30-ish minutes.